Hello everyone, today I am going to tell you a story that still lingers in the cracks of an old forgotten railway station. A tale that people refuse to believe until they hear it directly from someone who has stood near those abandoned tracks at night. And while you listen, I want you to remember that every story has a source, every rumor has a beginning, and sometimes the truth is far darker than the myth. So let me take you to the edge of a town that has almost been erased from modern maps, a place where the forest thickens, the fog never truly lifts, and the wind carries the sound of a train whistle long after the railway was declared inactive, because according to the locals, at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, a train arrives, but no record of it exists, no ticket for it has ever been sold, no conductor has ever been seen, and yet those who have stood near the platform swear they saw its dim headlights piercing through the mist, the shriek of metal against metal as it slowed to a halt, and ghostly silhouettes pressing their pale faces against its dark windows, waiting for someone to step inside, someone foolish enough to believe it was just another late night ride. But the strange part is that the platform where this train appears is not connected to the main line anymore. The rails are rusted, the wood is rotting, weeds have broken through the stone, and yet somehow when the clock strikes 3, everything becomes alive again, as if the world bends to allow this phantom arrival, and I will tell you the story of one man who dared to investigate, a journalist named Daniel, who believed it was nothing more than a local legend, the kind of story villagers tell to keep kids from wandering too far at night. But he was wrong, terribly wrong, because once the train arrived, he realized that the legend was not only true, it was far more horrifying than anyone had ever whispered, and his journey into the unknown is the reason why his name still appears scratched into the walls of that station, as if he tried to leave a warning for anyone who would come after him. Daniel had arrived in town on a rainy afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds that pressed down like a suffocating blanket, and though he had planned to interview a few locals about the so-called ghost train, he was met with silence, doors closing as soon as he introduced himself, eyes avoiding his questions, and the only person who spoke to him was an old station master, long retired, who spent his days sitting by the abandoned platform, carving strange marks into pieces of wood and humming an old railway tune. And when Daniel asked him about the train, the old man stopped humming, his hand trembling slightly, and he said in a broken voice, "You don't wait for that train, son, because once you hear it coming, it's already too late." These words stuck in Daniel's mind, but being a rational man, he dismissed them as superstition, determined to prove the story false by witnessing the emptiness of the platform at 3 in the morning. So he set up his camera, his tape recorder, and his notepad, every tool ready to capture evidence of nothingness. But as midnight approached, the air grew unnaturally cold. The mist thickened until even the trees were reduced to shadows, and the silence became oppressive, broken only by the faint dripping of rainwater from the roof of the station. And then at exactly 3 o'clock, the silence shattered with a distant whistle, faint at first, like a memory carried on the wind, but then louder, echoing through the valley, followed by the metallic rumble of wheels against tracks. And Daniel's heart froze because the rusted rails before him had suddenly begun to vibrate, glowing faintly as if they had come alive again, and from the shadows beyond the forest, 2 pale headlights emerged, cutting through the fog, and the massive outline of an old black train rolled forward, hissing steam and shrieking metal, slowing as it reached the deserted platform, and Daniel could not believe his eyes because this was no modern machine. It was a relic from the past, its paint peeling, its windows cracked, and yet inside, faint silhouettes moved, turning their heads slowly toward him as if aware of his presence, their hollow eyes pressing against the glass. Daniel felt an urge deep in his chest, like an invisible hand pushing him forward, whispering that he should step closer, just a little closer, and as the doors creaked open with a moan that sounded more like a scream, a wave of cold air poured out, carrying the smell of rust, decay, and something else, something foul, and from the dark interior of the train, A conductor appeared, or at least what resembled one, dressed in a torn uniform from a century ago, his face hidden under the shadow of his cap, his hand stretching out a ticket that was blank, but Daniel, fighting against the pull, tried to step back, clutching his camera, and asked in a shaking voice, "Where does this train go?" The conductor slowly raised his head, and though Daniel would never forget it, he could never fully describe the face he saw, because it wasn't a face at all. It was a shifting blur of hollow sockets and stretched skin, like something caught between worlds, and the only answer it gave was a whisper that seemed to come from every direction at once. "You already know." Daniel stumbled backward, his rational mind collapsing under the weight of terror, and he raised his camera to capture the proof. But when he looked through the lens, the train was gone, the platform empty, the mist silent. Yet when he lowered the camera, the train was still there, waiting, doors open, silhouettes inside growing restless, tapping at the glass as if urging him to join them. And before he could run, the old station master appeared beside him, his face pale, his eyes wide with desperation, grabbing Daniel's arm and shouting, "Don't look at it. Don't listen. If you acknowledge it, it will never let you go." But Daniel had already seen too much, already heard too much, and the pull was stronger than before, voices echoing in his head, chanting names, his name among them, and before he realized it, his foot was on the first step of the train, his body moving against his will, the air inside colder than death, shadows curling around him like smoke. And though the old man tried to drag him back, Daniel's hand slipped free, the doors slammed shut, and with a screech that split the night, the train began to move, disappearing into the mist, its whistle fading into the distance, and the station was silent once again. The next morning, villagers found the old man collapsed on the platform, clutching Daniel's notepad, his face frozen in terror, and scratched into the wood of the bench where Daniel had waited were the words, "Do not board." Since that night, no one has seen Daniel again, but some claim they hear his voice calling out from the windows of the passing train at 3 in the morning. His face pressed against the glass, begging to be let out, and others say if you listen closely, you can hear him whispering warnings. Whether he is trying to save you or lure you aboard, no one knows, and so the legend continues, the train that never arrived and yet always does, a ghostly cycle that no one can escape once they acknowledge its existence. And now that you have heard this story, remember, if you ever find yourself near the ruins of an old railway station and the clock strikes 3, and you hear a distant whistle, do not look, do not listen, and above all, never step onto the train that never arrives.